Hello, everybody.
Might want to use the mic.
Okay, we're just going to do a little invocation first, and I'm just going to pray to the God of us all. Heavenly Father, our nation is in peril. We witnessed history take a very bad turn last night with the indictment of a former president. This has never happened before in our country. We need people, we need leadership. We have some terrific leadership in this room today. We need patriots of a great caliber to fight what really is good against evil, and people who would like to turn the country into something unrecognizable from our Constitution and Bill of Rights. So we pray for all of the patriots in the country to stand up and rise up, and all the good leaders and the people with great knowledge of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and what to do to prevent the ruination of this country, to stand up. And then, of course, we pray for the health and wisdom of everyone here, our families, and courage in this nation. The time needs courage. No pale colors will do. And we pray this in our Heavenly Father's name. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you. We're just going to do the pledge. If you stand.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and I would just take less than 5 minutes to tell you a little bit about Convention of States. Now, we're doing this under Convention of States, our foundation. So that's a 501c3. As you know, it can educate, but it can't advocate. I mainly work in Convention of States Action, which is a 501c4, so we can educate and advocate. And we educate citizens on the Constitution and their constitutional rights. We hold meetings. We can have limited calls to actions nationally or statewide, but we need our state director to approve, or nationally we need the national leadership to approve. And then we hold events like this one when we're lucky enough to get the caliber of people we have here today. And we also work to convene a convention of states. We are among the largest grassroots organizations in the nation, approaching 7 million people. We have volunteers and supporters. You would, of course, know that we have a lot of conservatives and Republicans. You'd be surprised how many disaffected Democrats or people who are still Democrats but are getting more and more wary of the party and what it's representing, and many independents. And so we mainly believe in a limited federal government, as the founders did, doing fewer things, but doing them far better than they're being done lately. And keeping to what the founders had in terms of the 3 branches with their scope of jurisdiction and their duties, instead of usurping rights as we see now among the executive and among Congress, taking rights that really belong to the states or we the people. So in a nutshell, that's what we believe, and you can learn more at conventionofstates.com, and you can learn about Article 5, which is what the founders gave us to change things for the better if we ever had tyrannical government. I don't know about you, but I think we have a federal government that fits that definition right now. So that's mainly what we do. Please come to the website, Convention of States, to learn more. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, I actually, because I'm sort of an anal-retentive person, I wrote a little bit about their bios, just in case I didn't know if some of the speakers were introducing each other or if their aides were going to do it. But I'll start with Representative Jean Black, Representative Black was elected in 2022. He serves District 15. It's covering Nassau County and parts of Duval. He sits on various important committees and subcommittees. These include the State Affairs Committee, Agriculture and Natural Resources Appropriations Subcommittee, the Children, Family and Seniors Subcommittee, the Healthcare Regulations, as well as the Healthcare Appropriations Subcommittee. He and his lovely wife, Kim, have 5 children. Representative Black also serves as chairman of Duval GOP, and he has important governance responsibilities for several Republican clubs here. So that's Representative Black. And speaking about Senator Clay Yarborough, he became senator in 2022. He serves in District 4, covering also Nassau County and parts of Duval. He and his wife Jordan have 4 beautiful kids. He was earlier a well-regarded Florida state representative. The senator is chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He serves on the Appropriations Committee on Criminal and Civil Justice. He serves on the Appropriations Committee for Transportation, Tourism, and Economic Development. He serves on the Criminal Justice, Educational Committees for Post-Secondary, as well as Pre-K through 12th grade committees. Also, Fiscal Policy and Rules Committee and Joint Committee on Public Council Oversight. So you can see these are very capable, busy men. So without that, I introduce you both, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about a rather stellar 2023 legislative session.
Appreciate it. With that, very kind introduction. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see you. I'm Clay Yarborough, State Senator for District 4, as was mentioned, and I'm very pleased to be here with my colleague, Representative Dean Black. And I don't want to steal any of your thunder, Madam Chair, but I also want to mention we do have representation from Representative Jessica Baker's office with Anna Reagan, who's here today, too. And I don't know if I didn't miss anybody else, but we just always make mention of colleagues and those who help us, and she's in our delegation, too, so certainly. We're glad to be here. I wanted to just briefly thank it's always a team effort with what we do in the legislature and certainly many other functions. So I wanted to mention David, raise your hand over here, David. David Poppy is my chief legislative aide in our state Senate District 4 office. So I wanted to make mention that he was here today, and Rep, you want to mention your team too.
Yeah, so I have Donovan Bradley, my legislative aide in Tallahassee is here, and Debbie Plotz is the aide for Duval County. She runs all things Duval. So we couldn't do a thing without our staff. So let's give it up for our staff. And I too would like to thank you all to your leadership for putting this event on. And thank you all for taking time right in the middle of the workday to come participate in the betterment of our republic. And that's what we have been doing in Tallahassee for most of the preceding several months. The Speaker of the House said that the legislative session that we just completed was the most consequential legislative session in any state in more than a century. And I think he might have been modest there. I think you might actually have to go back to the 1860s to find more consequential work being done. And I'll let the good senator here start off with a synopsis.
Sure, and with your indulgence too, what we really wanted to do was just kind of run down a list of, there were so many, we won't be able to cover all of them, but we wanted to tell you about some of the key pieces of legislation that we took up this session. So one of the big themes that we had not only this year, but last year was very prominent in Tallahassee was protection of our children, whether that be in public schools or other spaces out there in public or just various other places. And so this year what we did, most of you know, or all of you know, last year we took a pretty hard position with regard to content that is taught in our public school classrooms and passed a bill that said kindergarten through 3rd grade is not the appropriate place where any topics of a sexual nature should be taught and instructed in those classrooms. Common sense to most of us, but yet it was a battle. It was a very heated battle The battle continued for months after that. You all know about Disney's involvement, just all the other things with that. A lot was put out there in the media. It was twisted up and it was dubbed with a title that had nothing to do with, rather, it was not mentioned anywhere in the bill. It had to do with instruction, not general discussion of certain topics. And it was not something where if you mention a certain word in a classroom, that you're going to be expelled or a teacher would be fired or something like that. What it did say was, if you use taxpayer-funded instructional time to talk about gender ideology, sexual orientation, anything of a sexual nature in those elementary grades, then that is running afoul of what is good and whole in Florida. And we took a hardline stance on that. So that was last year, K through 3. And then what we did this year was we expanded that. We did back into pre-K to make sure pre-K is protected. And then we also took it up to 8th grade and made it pre-K through 8. So we expanded last year's law and made it pre-K through 8. Before we even got done with legislative session, our good Department of Education, under very good leadership right now, decided, well, we're going to put 9th through 12th in also. So our bill ended up being a floor. So like we're going to emphasize today, it's a team effort. It's not just a one-person show. So the Department of Education, we said pre-K through 8 in our bill. The DOE said 9 through 12. So what will happen is if that were ever to change in the future, then it would still be 8th grade. So it's still a higher standard than it was before. But thankfully, at least we know for the foreseeable future, it'll be 9 through 12. And it didn't say you could never talk about topics that are appropriate, like in a reproductive health curriculum or, informally known as sexual education. But you can't just rattle off about all this ideology and all. And look, here's the position that's even more common sense. I'm the son of a retired public school teacher, and we had many a kitchen table conversation over the years about all the things to do with education. And I don't believe that it's right for us to thrust the teachers in the middle of all this cultural stuff, the social agendas and all that, because then they've got to sort through it and hope that they're giving the right response and answer, or they will be in trouble. It's not fair with all that they have on their plate trying to teach our kids the basics of, reading, writing, arithmetic, stuff like that. That's going to help them be a good student and eventually a good member of society. It's not fair to them. So we don't believe we should put all that on them and burden them with it. We need to help the kids get mastery of skills, get prepared to get out of school, and then go on and do whatever that they're going to do. So we took that up in a bill. Another key piece of that bill was we said if there are objectionable materials that are found in libraries in the schools, which already under state law, you can't have anything pornographic in the libraries and things of that nature. But yet we were finding things in the libraries anyway. Some of them might have just needed to move, not pornographic material, but other material that's more age inappropriate for elementary, might have just been in need of moving up to middle school or maybe middle to high school. Some of them fell in that category, but there were other examples that were wholly inappropriate to be in there, even books with very descriptive stories and cartoon characters doing sexual acts and all of that. Now, let me give you a very upfront example. And our colleague, Senator Agolia from Hernando County, said this the best on the floor during debate. He said, look, if I went into one of these libraries, pulled one of these books that is now out of the library, where they have these cartoon characters doing these different sexual acts, if I took a picture on my cell phone of that in that book, and I texted it to the 8-year-old sitting across the hall in Mrs. Smith's class over here, then I could be charged with a federal crime for transmission of pornography. He said, but for some reason, we're supposed to turn a blind eye if Jimmy or Susie want to check the book out and sit over in the corner and read all this stuff in the library. It's just ridiculous. So this is common sense stuff that it is so sad that we even have to make a law for. But that's what's happening. And the other side is pushing and saying, y'all are just banning books. You're wanting to take all the stuff out of the library. So our rhetorical back to them is, well, which of the books with pornography in them do you want us to put back in the library? And they didn't say anything after that. So it's, the rhetoric is put out there, the narrative is put out there a certain way. You know this. We see this in the news every single day, every hour. And that's what we're up against. So education, very important. The second bill, one of the other bills, a second bill that I ran in the Senate and our House colleagues passed very strongly, was related to adult performances. Now, we've had on the books for a long time rules regarding adult entertainment. You think of traditional establishments where you have certain activities. There's alcohol. There's maybe a few clubs, maybe not, mostly not. It would be out of place for a kid to go into one of those places, a minor or a young person. But there are venues out there who have all kinds of shows, whether it's with men or women, that kids should not be in those performances. They'll dub them family friendly. They'll say we have this and all the all the different things, and there's no problem, there's no issue. Well, we put a new definition in that said an adult live performance is any presentation, exhibition, or show where you have nudity, sexual activities, lewd conduct, lewd exposure, anything of the like that runs afoul of our obscenity law, and it's not appropriate for a minor to be in those venues. If a venue allows a child to come in, then they can risk losing their liquor license. You gotta hit them in the pocketbook. Risk losing their liquor license. The person who literally let them in the door, the ticket taker, could be charged with a misdemeanor. And then they could also have their business license pulled. We are taking a very hard stand to protect children in Florida. So what we did not do, let me be clear in saying that, we did not ban any shows. That's the thing. They got put all out, especially with June this month, a lot of activities around different things. They said, oh, you're banning all these events. We didn't ban anything. Adults can still do what they want to do. But we said if a kid is let into a venue or to an event that's been permitted by a local government and those activities are taking place, then you have run afoul of the law, and that is a harm to children. And thankfully, that was already signed into law, as has the education. So that was yeah, please.
Yeah, so on that same bill, over on the House side, there was a floor debate there. I mean, an argument. And the left was arguing that this very commonsensical bill was going to somehow shut down all the pride parades in the country. And it would also shut down all drag shows in the country. Now, it doesn't mention any of those things. And so our rhetorical question back to them in the House was, are you saying that all the pride parades and drag shows are patently offensive and lewd and being done in front of children? Crickets there too.
And as a final, that's a very good point too. As a final note, this is lost in the conversation. It's kind of on its face, and you get it because these are things that I know this group is very faithfully aware about, these matters that are so important, and you follow all of it. But not only is it concerning that a child would come into a place where something like that is happening, but what should probably concern us more is that we're fought by and opposed by those who believe it's okay for them or others to do those things in front of kids. You follow me? So it's not enough to have a kid in there, but the fact that adults want to do all of that in front of the kids, that's even worse to me. That they think there's a right to be able to do that and expose kids and sexualize them and do all of that. That's just outrageous. So that was the second one. The third one that I mentioned too, and then I'll turn it over to Rep. Black to update on some of the other bills, is related to the sex reassignment surgeries. So there are legitimate conditions out there where, whether it be a child or adult alike, there can be some struggles with different conditions. There's gender dysphoria, there's different things. Some of that from childhood into adulthood, some grow out of or whatnot, but there are those who struggle with some of the issues. So what we have seen is, and we've heard stories from young people too, across the country. There's one, some of you may know Chloe Cole's story. Chloe's from California. She's 18 now, but when she was 13 or 14, she was struggling with gender dysphoria. Well, from her mental health professionals and from the doctors, they told her and her parents that the only way to cure your gender dysphoria is by you considering surgeries, by you getting on puberty blockers, and by you taking some hormone antagonists. That's the only thing that's going to cure you from your dysphoria. So she begins to undergo these treatments, 14, 15 years old. 15 had a double mastectomy, and then she ultimately changed her mind. Doctors came back a couple of years later and said, sorry, we've made a mistake. You're actually on the autism spectrum, and you struggle with ADHD, and we should have done further analysis. But they had channeled her, just like some of them are doing with many other young people and adults, I believe, into the stocks of believing the only cure for this, and funny how it's so new, a lot of it, but funny, the only cure for this is by you having surgery and getting body parts cut off. So letting kids be mutilated by all this stuff. And, we are certainly not attacking doctors or mental health professionals. We have tons of good ones out there, but those who believe it's okay to do this to kids, wholly inappropriate. So we banned it outright for minors in Florida. If any of them are already on some of the prescriptions for treatments, we're going to let that go for a little bit, not let it go and it's not important, but let them continue because we didn't want to stop it cold turkey and there'd be some medical episode, that's really not good. But they can secede from that over time. But surgeries are outright banned in Florida now because of the last thing I would mention on that is, Chloe has changed her mind and she's detransitioning. She's also suing all her doctors. But we put in, I'm not a fan of creating new forms of what's called cause of action or lawsuits with a lot of things, but on this one I was. We fought for a while to try to get the number of years right on this, but we put in a 20-year cause of action for the protection. If there was a minor, say 15 years old, who went through something similar to Chloe, and then maybe up to the time they're 25, for example, they continue all those treatments into adulthood, but then they decide, this isn't something I want to do anymore. They then have 20 years from the time they stop to still have a cause of action to go after those individuals who did that to them. So Chloe goes around the country now advocating. My last point, she's trying to warn others and say, look, I don't even know if I can have kids now. Number one, she's only 18 now. I don't even know if I can have kids. If I were to have a child and say I wanted to, bond with my new baby through breastfeeding or other things, that's really what did it for her. She tells her story publicly. She said, that's what changed my mind. I realized I may not be able to have that bond with my baby if I want to do that. And she now goes around advocating that. So I wish we could help her. That another state is passed, but we got to protect kids in Florida. They should not be using our kids for social experimentation. So we do rely on all that. I'm going to stop that right left.
So I'm just going to pick right up where you left off. The senator always says in the Senate, it's like a library. It's really quiet. Nobody gets excited in the Senate. But he says in the House, now that's a circus. It's a carnival, yeah. And I don't know if it's always that way, but it was certainly true in this legislative session. And just continuing on the theme of protecting our children from this radical ideology, these are things that a few years ago, if you'd have said we'd have actually been debating this in the legislature and finding a need to pass laws to deal with this, I would have said you're crazy. There's no way. The stuff that we're debating right now, the left was willing to fight and die on the Hill for the right to expose children to sexual obscenity, to do it through public performances, to do it through books in their schools, and to do it through allowing there's nothing else to call it, the sexual genital mutilation of children surgically. And they're willing to fight us on that. I mean, fight you in the street. And they're willing to plant their flag on that hill and politically die on that hill. And I believe that the American people still know right from wrong. I know all of you still know right from wrong. This is crazy. And what we did in the Senate and the House is we stood for common sense. And we said, okay, we'll fight you on that. And by the way, you're on TV. And go ahead and make that argument to parents and citizens all across the country, because everybody in the country, all across America, they're watching what we do here in Florida, y'all. And we struck mighty blows, not just in this genre of legislation, but we don't have enough time in this day to tell you about all the consequential great bills that were passed in this historic session. Normally you'd get one or two in a session. I don't know. I can't get a straight answer yet of how many really consequential bills we passed. 25, 30, 35? Was it more? I don't know. And all of America is watching what we do. And we know y'all have our back. And so we go there and we fight these people. And because of what we're doing, America looks at Florida and we have become the hope of the nation. Because these things that we're dealing with, they're so crazy. The problem seems so intractable. It's such a mess. You feel like you just can't solve it. What in the world are we going to do? Well, look, I'm sure that we're mostly men and women of faith in this room. And we realize that problems that are just incomprehensible to us, that are really difficult to us, they're not so great for him. And so we recognize that what we're fighting in these battles, well, yeah, they're legislative battles, but it's a lot more than that. These things that we're arguing about, they don't show up on any political continuum that you study in a political science class. This is just evil. That's all it is. But we know how to deal with that. We fight evil, right? All right, so let me tell you about the carnival in the House. So my colleague, Representative Randy Fine, was carrying the bill to ban the transsexual surgery among minors, and he pointed out that, look, in Europe, where they've been doing this far longer, they've learned that 80% of these children wish it had never happened to them once they become adults, that it literally is the mutilation of children. In fact, it's just a form of child abuse, and rightly ought to be banned. And he said, today we stand to fight evil. Now, while he said that, there were hundreds of protesters outside the rotunda, mostly men wearing dresses. Up in the gallery, there were hundreds more. They all have the same makeup artist, apparently. It's not very good. Out in the rotunda, they're screaming bloody murder. They're going crazy. We heard another bill that day. I was the sole co-sponsor of my colleague, Representative Rachel Plakin's bill to basically ban men from using the women's restroom and vice versa.
Thanks.
So we had a couple of bills going that day. It was really upsetting those people. And the debate happened. There was high drama. I've told some of the story, but I'll tell it again. Should I? So the Democrats were melting down. They were sobbing. They were crying. I mean, uncontrollable bawling. Okay, makeup dripping down the face. I mean, it was horrible, right? All the other Democrats on the floor of the House going to surround their colleague and console them. And this was during the debate about the bathroom, about men don't go in the women's restroom and vice versa. And their argument was that this would just be horrible because people would not know what bathroom to go to. And so a transsexual wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom, and so now they would soil themselves. And so then they would feel bad. And then they would feel so bad they would commit suicide. And this would just happen all over Florida. And this was just going to be really, really, really bad. Mayhem in the streets. Oh my gosh, crying tears off the makeup. And I just thought, this is too much. This is just too much. What we really need here is a little comic relief. So I got recognized by the speaker, and I said, look, can I just point out that for hundreds of years, men went to the men's restroom and women went to the women's restroom. Or they went to a unisex bathroom and everything was just fine. And I submit, if you go back to doing it that way, it'll be just fine now. And we'll respect women's privacy in the bathroom. And we will revert back to the circumstance where the toilet seat is left in its right and proper down position. And they rolled, they laughed. The Democrats did not like it. That's when they started chanting my name out in the rotunda. They don't like me very much. Somebody mailed me a toilet seat and said, thank you for protecting our privacy. Thank you for making sure toilet seats will stay in the down position. And we're going to have a shadow box made. It's going on the wall in my office in Tallahassee. You're all invited to come see it. So we voted. We voted. And we supported Senator Yarborough's bill about the transgender mutilation of children in the bathrooms. We voted. And it wasn't even close. And they melted down up in the gallery. All of the left-wing people with dresses and strange makeup artists, they threw their underwear at us. They did. It is a carnival, after all. So they cleared the gallery. I'm sorry, what did you say?
Isn't that assault with a deadly weapon?
Well, let me just I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you what it is. It's them trying to make an argument before the American people, because all eyes watch Florida. It's live on TV. And I just don't think that's a very good argument. I don't think you really make your argument very strong when you throw underwear onto the floor of the Florida House and I don't think you convince many people that you ought to be trusted with political power by doing that either. I think what you do is show yourself to be something very different from those things. And remember, this is a debate that we're having, and a debate's just an argument. And my grandmother used to tell me, honey, it's hard to win an argument when you're wrong. Well, that kind of behavior is so wrong, right? And it helps to give hope to America. And if that's how they want to behave, if they want to keep arguing on these type issues, I think they will do so to their political doom. And we did a lot of other things. I mean, and we really shouldn't spend too much time on this. The death penalty. We've reverted back to the scenario where it takes an 8 to 12 vote to impose the death penalty. Now remember, you had to have a universal finding of guilt to begin with, right? There's that, but then Representative Baker proffered a bill, and it was passed and signed into law, making child rapists eligible for the death penalty as well. And that's someone who rapes a child under the age of 12. So those are things we did. House Bill 1. You want to talk to him about House Bill 1?
Yeah, sure. House Bill 1 was a priority for the whole legislature, but especially for the Speaker of the House, related to universal school choice. And so we have long said and believe, I personally do, and I believe that the legislature does as well, that the money should follow the student and not just be used to inject into a system to keep a system going. Now, when I say that, the Florida Constitution says very clearly with regard to education, a quality education is in the best interest of every child in Florida. We wholeheartedly and fundamentally agree, but it does not say that you have to do that through the public school system. So you can have a good, adequately funded, well-functioning public school system. I said you can have one. You can have one, but also we should not deny the right to parents if they want to send their child to a private school, if they want to homeschool, if they want to go to charter, co-op, whatever they want to do, they should be able to do that. And all of them are taxpayers. So all their money should not be denied from them to be able to use, or some of that would go for education otherwise in the public system. If they want to use that on scholarship to send their child to a private school or to do home education or anything like that, we fundamentally agree. So we passed that very strongly. The governor's already signed that bill as well. And so now money will rightfully follow the student. And it does not, as the other side criticizes, that it's going to rob all of this money out of the public school system. They do get a per pupil funding amount each year through what's called the FEFP. That's the Florida Education Finance Program. That's the fancy way of saying the dollars that fund the K-12 public school system in Florida. But they will still be funded based on the enrollment there. But if there are students over time, it's not going to happen right away. But over time, if you see shifts over to these other forms of education, that money doesn't just need to go keep pumping into the system over here when parents are making a decision for their kids to go in these other forms of education. Parents already have that right, whether we say it or not, but we have cemented that into law that parents have the right to care over the upbringing of their children, whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's anything else related to their child. That is a fundamental right that parents have. So that was cemented. We did that last piece a few years ago in the Parents' Bill of Rights. It was a new chapter in our statutes. But this year, with regard to school choice, that was a big thing, and that passed very smoothly as well.
It gave parents the ultimate choice. And we had people protesting about that. People coming to my office, I'm sure they came to yours, and they were furious with us. They said, you're destroying public education, which is not true, by the way. This is public education. But what they were really making was the argument, and I pointed this right back at them. They said because nobody's going to come to the traditional public school is what they meant, and therefore they'd be defunded. And I pointed out, I said, look, what you're saying is that if parents actually had a real choice in the matter, that they would never, of their own free will, go to your government-run school. And I'm sorry, but that is not an argument for why we should not pass this bill. It is an argument for why it's necessary, and I'm going to vote for it. And we did. So along that same line, for years, for more than a decade, we have tried to pass a bill to regulate unions and by that I mean public unions, such as teachers' unions in Florida. And that has been a nonstop battle. There would be repeated demonstrations, and it always died. In the last session, it got through the House but failed in the Senate. I picked that mantle up when I got to the House. I thought, I think we might have the votes in the Senate this time, and it'll be a heck of a fight. You'll really be the tip of the spear, because I'm telling you, they really fight this time. And we brought this bill, and it would ban, and it does, in fact, it's already been signed now. It would ban the automatic payroll deduction of union dues from teachers' paychecks. It requires that the union give to them audited financial statements, so that whatever that money is going to that they're collecting, they're gonna have transparency, so they're gonna know. Because often these unions are engaging in things and pursuing agendas that really the teachers are not down with this. They also have to have them re-enroll their membership every year, and there's a statement that they have to sign acknowledging that they have a right to join the union or not at their sole discretion. And the government's not going to get involved in it. We're not going to be automatically sucking it out of your pay. They also have to automatically, every year, report to their membership the salaries of their top 5 union officials. And the salaries would blow your mind. And then finally,
It's better. Tell the salary amount, the average salary.
the average salary amount for the top 5, now this is not one, this is the average, so some are more, $430,000.
Oh, they work hard.
Now, so what they have to do, they have to report, they have to be transparent and have integrity and honesty. And they have to report to the employees that they purport to represent. And they have to get at least 60% of those employees to agree to be represented by that union. And if they don't, then they can be dissolved. They have to petition for recertification. There can be an election. They can be thrown out. They can be fired.
Nice.
That's transparency. That's accountability. So if they really think that they can take money and funnel it to the Democrat Party, who then turns around and funnels it into school board races to radicalize our children with radical sexual agendas, if they think that they can do all of those things and meanwhile sit back and live like fat cats, well, they can do that, but I think they're going to have a hard time persuading the rank and file worker to participate in that.
Can I have one thing, Rick? I want to add one thing. I didn't remember this when we talked about it at a few other meetings before today, is I forgot that when we were in Tallahassee, my family goes over, we homeschool our boys, so they get to come over. It's like a big, great, fun civics lesson for them when we're in Tallahassee during session. So when they're over, during the day, sometimes they don't have free reign over it because they're still 4th grade and below. But they have tablets, and we'll let them play games for a little bit on there. We heavily guard it, but they can do that. So my son was playing a racing game or something like that, and they didn't come to the Capitol this particular day. They were at home, and my wife took a screenshot and showed me when I got home. Well, what he showed to her was, because they recognize if they see the word legislator or rep or senator, something like that. And an ad came up in the middle of the racing game he was playing, and it said, call your state legislator and tell them to oppose the bill that Rep. Black was just referencing, the Paycheck Protection Program. This is on my 10-year-old.
Your kids didn't call, did they?
They told me. But what's funny about it was targeted because we live in Jacksonville, but it said call Senator Simon. Well, Senator Simon is my Tallahassee colleague. So we were in his district living there for session, but it said call Senator Simon and tell him to vote no on the the bill number and all. So the FEA was also using those funds to put ads on the kids' tablets. And I called the person and said, what in the world are y'all doing? He said, well, we told them not to put it on anything that would go below the age of 18 or anything like that. And I sent him the screenshot. He said, oh, we'll look at it, sorry. That's deliberate stuff. It goes right in line to what Rep. Black is talking about, to try to get all down in there and even right in the face of the kids on these ads on their technology to try to use that or cultivate that agenda. And anyway, I'm sorry. I remember that.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's not enough to take our country back.
Yes, and my child knows, right, he said something, all the others just sit there.
It's not enough to take our country back. We have to take our children back. And much of the legislation that we just passed addresses that at a strategic level. And it echoes all across the country. And let me also say this. There were protesters, just to give you some idea of what this experience was like. There were protesters, not every day, but it sometimes felt like it. I mean, they were there all the time. I mean, we would go down to the session if there weren't protesters. That was noteworthy. Oh, there's no protesters. Maybe we're not doing anything important today. This is going to be boring. And they were freaking out when we were doing the debate on that union bill. My aide Donovan and I, we had to walk through a gauntlet. There must have been, I don't know, 200 or 300 people. I thought they were going to spit on us. They didn't. They didn't spit on us. And they didn't throw their underwear either. Another quick story. So we were hearing, I think it was maybe second reading of the union bill on the floor, and we had talked about the bathroom bill earlier in the day. Maybe that was second reading also. And as we were gathering to begin the session on the floor, I'm there with my colleagues, and there were a bunch of protesters screaming my name. They hate me, hate me, hate me. And there were a bunch of people up in the gallery, and somebody said, hey, look, there's your people up there. And there were a bunch of people all in red shirts. I said, yeah, that's my fan club. And then somebody looked a little closer. They said, no, those are all transsexuals. That's all men wearing dresses. That's not about the union bill. And, we razz each other, right? And I said, oh, no, that is a union. They said, no, look, that's all men in dresses, dressed like women. I said, no, that's the drag queen union. They said, really? There's a drag queen union? I said, yeah, you didn't know that? Of course there is. The drag queen union, they actually work for the school system. They said, what? I said, yeah, they work for the school system. They do? That's horrible. I go, yeah, they have them work for the school system. They dance for the kids. Oh, my God. But, it's kind of funny for us to kind of fool about. But, they weren't sure that couldn't be true. And it says something about our culture when you have to wonder, is it Babylon B or is it true? It says a lot about what we're fighting. Yes, sir.
Oh, just a quick clarification question. Has our state legislature made it patently illegal for any public school officials to impose transgender processes on kids without parental permission?
Yes.
Totally illegal.
And when you say that, you're talking about in the form of the first bill we talked about related to instruction and
Instruction
trying to
is the start of a process to transgender
Yes,
a kid,
because-
and the parents
yes.
have no clue what you're doing.
Yes, and because if that's considered a change in student services, if say a counselor at the school is going to have a conversation like that with a child, and they are breaking the law if they don't have a conversation with the parent, it could be even that a young girl goes to a teacher, to a counselor, and says, "Hey, I'm experiencing a cycle for the first time. What do I do?" They are supposed to let the parent know about all of that. So it's a huge accountability measure.
Beautiful.
So we're trying to clamp in as much as we can to put back against all that. Without parents not knowing about it. So, Blake.
First of all, I want to thank you. I've known you since the HRO came along, and you stood for family rights and family values. And you've been over in Tallahassee, and one of the things you did was, I remember that pamphlet you put together. They had a pamphlet for telling people how to get divorced, but there was nothing in it about supporting marriage, and you got ridiculed for that. I want to thank you for doing that. You stood for family and faith all the way through your career. We have a lot of people in this room know about Jasmine, particularly since Jasmine, they just tried to get Jasmine out of the school board. But they don't know about the Jacksonville Public Education Fund. And they don't know that what the LGBT people are doing, people are doing in the Duval school systems, is passing off all the gloves, indoctrination, and training to JPAF, for JPAF to teach the teachers, with JPAF being an independent organization and not subject to the things you're talking about. Is there anything that you could do that the state has that you can work on to outlaw and stop that kind of a third-party violation or abrogation of the laws that you have?
Yeah, thank you, Blake, for the question. Before that, your humbling comments. I appreciate what you just said, and the board gets the credit. So on that actual question about the public education fund, I think the best thing, I know Representative Black would agree, is we have to make sure next fall, when we have school board races on the ballot again, that we are electing individuals to our school board that protect the Constitution, that will protect our children. Thankfully, right now, we have April Carney and Charlotte Joyce on the school board who are doing outstanding work, but they're only 2 of the 7. So with next fall's election, we'll have 4 seats up. Arguably, at least 2 of them, maybe 3, can be put. We can get individuals in there who will do exactly what you're doing, exactly what you're saying, which is to go through everything we have there, like April and Charlotte are doing now, and see what contracts do we have, what groups do we have influencing our kids, what curriculums being approved to go in the classroom and in the library at schools, and all of that. So that, to me, I know it's like all the way up to the top, but that's what we need that can start that shift and do it, probably do it quicker than it otherwise would take place locally by getting the right folks on our school board.
And one of the things that we did to make that process easier is we passed a joint resolution to make school board races partisan. Right now, you can't tell who's who and what they stand for. And look, we are a very polarized, very partisan country now, and for good reasons, I think. And I think it's good for the voter to know exactly what side you're on, because I think that tells them a lot about the values that you support, and it's easy and quick and it'll be right there on your ballot. And I think it's about transparency and giving the voters the information that they need to make a decision for our kids. I guess we've transitioned into questions here. Is that the way we're done?
You're welcome to questions now if you want, or you can talk more about the bills you want to, and then we can have questions after.
Well, and I see that we have our good Secretary of State and our delegation chair, Representative Thomas Evans.
As long as we're good on time.
Okay, yeah.
Sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, Senator Yarborough, what about I got 2 for you. What about drag time story hour? Is that still allowed?
So what we, again, in our bill, the way that we balanced it between all of the legislature and then also working with the governor's office is there are no events that are banned as far as the shows that I defined a few minutes ago. But what we put in was a definition that said if you have any of these shows, exhibitions, or performances where you have someone who is depicting or simulating nudity, sexual activities, lewd conduct, or the like, that is now against Florida law. So in particular, that kind of event was not mentioned. So we can't say, well, the individual can't dress a certain way or do, like you said, the story hour. I prefer we do, but that wasn't part of the bill we took up this year. But we did say if there are activities that start to take place in that type of event or in a parade on Main Street in some city in Florida, or if it's in a venue where you've got those things happening in a show in an enclosed venue, then that's not appropriate. And if a child is there, then it runs afoul of the law. So it did narrow very much what's allowed. And I don't know that any of those activities have been taking place in some of those story hours. Some might have been. But if they in any way start getting into those activities, then there's going to be trouble because it's going to run afoul of the law. But we are still looking at it too, because that one, from a constitutional standpoint, we had a lot of attorneys looking at that too. That one was the hardest one to try to figure out how to do. So the farthest we got from a local perspective this time was to say a local government can't permit to an event or an organizer that they can do, a show publicly that has those events, or if they permit it under the guise that wasn't going to take place, and then something does take place, the event organizer is then criminally held responsible. So that could be something even out on a public street where there's children. And then if it's something that happens just kind of organically, like say it's in a city park, it wasn't a permitted event, but somebody goes over there and starts doing things, that runs afoul of indecency laws that we already have on the books at the local level. So long answer to your question, I apologize, but we're looking at more ways we can.
Right, we're not done with it, but the short answer is the legislation focused on behavior. No matter what kind of event, no matter where, it's the behavior. There's certain behavior you shouldn't be engaged in front of children, and this will take them to task for that.
And did a judge just overrule, I know I read it, overrule about the gender affirming surgery?
So Judge Hinkle this week, one of the judges for the Middle District of Florida said there were 7 families that brought a suit of complaint against Senate Bill 254, which was the one on sex reassignment ban. And so for 3 of those, he granted temporary relief to where they could continue with the treatments, but it didn't set the whole law aside. Now they're going to keep trying to do that. But at this point, the law still stands, and it went into effect immediately upon signature a couple of weeks ago by the governor. At the moment, it's only relief for those 3 families.
All right, thank you.
Let me talk about a couple more bills, and let me say one other thing. Y'all, we took a steamroller and we flattened the left, and they